All right, here we go. Welcome everyone. This is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Rebel, and welcome to the Jeet Kune broadcast, the I Love Jeet Kune broadcast number 33. Hang on one second, let me just pull up my folder here, and we will get this show on the road. We're talking today about Jeet Kune quotes and, to a certain degree, misquotes. Also interpretations or descriptions or analysis and breakdown of some of these things. Hang on. Okay, there we go. The genesis of today's program came from something that happened during the week, last week, and okay, so I'll just tell it to you this way. So this is what we came across, right? We came across, it's now the infamous quote. It's not only infamous, it's ubiquitous. I mean, literally, it's all over. If you do a search, right? Do a Google search and just type in the words, "I fear not the man." You will spend the next 2 hours going through a whole bunch of different things with this one quote, right? So everybody knows the quote. And, being a contrarian, like when you have a whole bunch of people jumping on a bandwagon, then I'm one of the first to jump off said bandwagon, right? So anyhow, so the infamous quote, right? Actually, because it came up, so on a lark, I was trying to find what might have been Cedro Bruce Lee's source material for the quote. But I didn't find exactly what I was looking for. The closest thing is, and I didn't even make a note of it. It's from Miyamoto Musashi's writings, and it does talk about. Actually, I did you guys a disservice. I really should have made a note about it. So maybe I'll have to redeem myself next week, right? So you know the quote: "I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks, right? I fear instead the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times," right? Okay, so obviously, Bruce Lee could never have been being literal about this. Because why? First of all, 10,000 different kicks do not exist. So to say, "I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks" could never be literal. Nobody, I don't care what degree, Taekwondo or Muay Thai, arts that focus on kicking a lot, Boxe Francaise or what have you, 10,000 kicks do not exist in anybody's arsenal. So there's no way that Bruce Lee was being literal when he said, "I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks." And then here's the other thing. If you only do these 10,000 kicks once, because that's what the quote says, right? "I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once." That's not practice. You see, that's performance. So a more accurate quote might have been, "I fear not the man who has performed," right? 10,000 different kicks, right? So it's look, everybody loves the quote. There's another one that I will not mention that's probably loved even more than this one, but you see it everywhere. "I fear not the man." Somebody has even turned it into something about games. "I fear not the person who has played 10,000 video games," or whatever, right? Okay. Obviously, what this is about the art of practice. So what I thought we would do on today's broadcast, right? And this is going to be a short session. I thought I'd share with you some other things that Bruce Lee has said about practice, right? And about the art of practice. So in Jeet Kune commentaries, right, on the martial way, right? One of our favorites on the I Love Jeet Kune broadcast. So page 56, he says, "As to martial arts, I still practice daily. Since I started to practice realistically in 1966 with protectors and gloves, etc., I feel that I had many prejudices before, and they are wrong. so I changed the name of the gist of my study to Jeet Kune. All right, so I'm going to read that again. Because if we were to spend time now unpacking what I just read, we'd be here for an hour. So this might become a topic for a subsequent broadcast. But let me just say it to you again. As to martial arts, I still practice daily. Since I started to practice realistically in 1966, I feel that I had many prejudices before, and they are wrong. So I changed the name of the gist of my study to Jeet Kune. That actually makes me think of something. You know, there are even T-shirts out there that show, and there's stuff that says that Jeet Kune was established in 1967. But there's this one sign that I have shown you you guys before, where it says 1966. But the accepted wisdom is that JKD dates back to 67. I think when you read that quote, well, it's not really a quote, it's just some of his notes. When you read those notes, I think that's the evidence that if we were going to date the emergence of Jeet Kune, it should actually be 1966 and not 1967, right? Okay. So when you read this, you can see how when he says, I feel that I had many prejudices before, right? So I changed the gist of my study to Jeet Kune. There's another part where he says Jeet Kune's first concern is about its experience and not its modes of expression, right? Let me say it again. Jeet Kune's first concern is about its experience and not its modes of expression. So in other words, it is the direct experience of Jeet Kune that is more important than necessarily the method of expression or the mode of expression, aka the particular art or fighting method that you might be using to apply that Jeet Kune experience, right? So you can see how this touches on the idea of being free to study the things that make sense to you, the things that are what I call personally suitable, right? So now on the second one, on page 134, hold on. So on page 134, if I can get to it, embarrassing. He says, in practicing Jeet Kune, we must practice swiftly and actively, but in real fighting, we have to keep our brain calm. Don't let your mind be conquered by stupid thoughts. Okay, let me read that again. In practicing Jeet Kune, we must practice swiftly and actively. But in real fighting, we have to keep our brain calm. Don't let your mind be conquered by stupid thoughts, right? This, I think, is an indication. Let me hang on to this because I got to show you something, right? This is about having the right mindset in both your training and obviously in actual fighting, right? No stupid thinking either in practice or out there on the street. So to me, stupid thinking, another way, no stupid thinking, another way of expressing that is what is called accurate thinking, or Napoleon Hill accurate thinking. So in this particular edition, and Kevin Seaman is on, so I know Kevin will appreciate my pulling this out, right? So in this particular edition, page 124, right? It is principle number 10 of the 17 principles of personal achievement, right? Think accurately. So let me read two paragraphs for you. Think of your mind as a piece of land. Through diligent planned work, it can be cultivated into a beautiful and productive garden. Or it can lie fallow, overrun by weeds, sprouting from seed carried by passing birds and the wind. Harvesting the bounty of your mind depends on careful effort and preparation by you, the gardener. This organization and its successful implementation are the result of accurate thinking, right? That's fairly long. I'm not going to read it to you again. You guys can rewind the video and or even better, pick up a copy, any version of the 17 principles of personal achievement. But that one is about the power of accurate thinking. As a matter of fact, I didn't make a note of it, but I know from having read this more than once that he does actually write there about a guy who, while he was in prison, used the power of his thinking, and a few years later, he had brought most of the world to heel. I'm not going to tell you who it is. You guys can look that up for yourself, right? Okay, back to the commentaries book, right? On page 294, Cedro Bruce writes, until the student begins to spar, then he will stop searching for the accumulation of techniques. Rather, he will devote the needed hours of practice to the simple technique for its right execution, right? Until the student begins to spar, then he will stop searching for the accumulation of techniques. Rather, he will devote the needed hours of practice to the simple technique for its right execution. So this is an indication, I think, of the great value that all types of sparring will bring to you, whether it's free sparring, preset sparring, controlled sparring, full contact sparring, whatever. It's the opportunity for you to learn to do away with that which, like I said before, is personally unsuitable, right? So if it's unsuitable to you as an individual, sparring is a vehicle that you can use to determine what works for you and what doesn't work for you, right? So that brings us then to the so-called Bruce Lee quote that's been on my mind for a couple of weeks. I think I talked about it either last week or the weekend before. And that is the infamous, this is another one that's misquoted fairly often, right? So when it's misquoted, it's adapt what is useful, discard what is not, or something, right? So the original, the original, right? Not the original, but the original is this. We should carefully study the lessons which were learned in past wars at the cost of blood and which have been bequeathed to us. We must absorb conclusions thus reached to the test of our own experiences and absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, add what is specifically your own, right? That is the original. So if you were with me last week, you know what I'm talking about. I always used to make the mistake of saying that this was the sign, the what I call the 4 tenets of Jeet Kune. I always used to make the mistake of saying that this was the sign that hung at the Chinatown school, but I've been corrected a number of times by Cass Magda that it's a sign from the Filipino Kali Academy. But also, not just that, it's not a Bruce Lee quote. It's perhaps not even a Dan Inosanto quote. It is actually, the source material for this one is from Mao Zedong's book on a protracted war, right? So the part where he wrote, we must absorb conclusions thus reached to the test of our own experiences, that's what was altered to be research your own experience for the truth. So this source material, it's indicative of the fertile mind that our leaders in JKD had. So they took something which, I guess Mao Zedong's, in a politically correct world, Mao Zedong's writings might not be considered appropriate or whatever, right? But our JKD leaders had the insight to take material and be able to determine what makes sense and what doesn't make sense in our specific realm of Jeet Kune. And that's how we ended up with research your own experience for the truth, absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, and add what is specifically your own, right? So we'll move on. The absorb what is useful book, right? Because one thing leads to another. So on page 53, here's what it says, right? This is another familiar one. Finally, a Jeet Kune man who says JKD is exclusively JKD is simply not with it. He is still hung up on his own self-closing resistance, right? So I thought that in finishing up what we're talking about here, that we would branch out from JKD and branch out into another one of my favorite areas, right? Which is jazz. So you guys will know who Charlie Parker is, right? Bird Parker, right? Phenomenal bebop saxophonist, right? And I mean, if you study jazz, you have to study Charlie Parker. So Charlie Parker said this: you've got to learn your instrument. Then you practice, and then when you finally get up there on the bandstand, forget all that and just wail, right? Right? So think about that, right? You got to learn your instrument. So you got to learn your technique. You got to get your stuff down, right? Then you practice. Now, isn't that amazing, right? Because we have this thing called I don't even have a name for it, but it's learn the technique, practice the technique, functionalize the technique, dissolve the technique, something like that. I didn't say accurately, but you know what I'm talking about. That's Charlie Parker talking about music, talking about jazz. Learn your instrument and then practice, right? So we learn the fighting technique, practice, and then when if you gotta go, you go. You forget all that and you just wail, right? So I think that's a jazz Jeet Kune quote, right? As a matter of fact, here's what it reminded me of when he said forget all that and just wail. It reminded me, page 12 of the Tao, the old first edition of the Tao of Jeet Kune, where Bruce Lee says, forget about winning and losing, forget about pride and pain. Let your opponent graze your skin and you smash into his flesh, right? You guys know that one. Do not be concerned with your escaping safely, right? So forget about winning and losing, forget about pride and pain. Do not be concerned with your escaping safely. That is abandon. Just like Charlie Parker says, just wail, right? That is abandon in the instance of true combat, because you cannot be overly concerned with how safe it is that you're going to be. You got to go for it if when stuff is on the line, right? We'll go from jazz to classical music now, and I am not I'm not a big collector of classical music, but Beethoven. There's a Beethoven quote that says, "Do not only practice your art, but force your way into its secrets. Art deserves that, for it and knowledge can raise man to the divine." I'm going to read it again. I'm not even going to comment on it. I'm just going to let you guys hear it, right? And then you take from it what you want. But listen to this, right? Ludwig van Beethoven says, "Don't only practice your art, but force your way into its secrets. Art deserves that, for it and knowledge can raise man to the divine." That's it. I'm putting it out there. You can do with it what you want, right? Also on page 12 of the Tao, I got this one written here. Jeet Kune Do avoids the superficial, penetrates the complex, goes to the heart of the problem, and pinpoints the key factors. Now, if Kevin's still on here, because I have the thing scrolling, but I don't want to. Okay, so Kevin's still here, right? I know for sure that I'm sure all you guys do, but Kevin Seaman 100% agrees with that. Jeet Kune Do avoids the superficial, penetrates the complex, goes to the heart of the problem, and pinpoints the key factors. You see, here's the deal, right? And this is where my rebelliousness comes out. You see that kind of stuff that we have in Jeet Kune Do? That is not written, as far as I know, anywhere in any other martial art book, right? It is our property. It is the thought process, the words of the founder of Jeet Kune Do. So when people get out there and start talking about, oh yeah, Jeet Kune Do is just like this and it's just like that, bull crap. It isn't. Nowhere else have I come across in the study and practice of martial art something that is as deep as that. A thought process that is as deep as this thing. I'm going to read it to you again. Jeet Kune Do avoids the superficial, penetrates the complex, goes to the heart of the problem, and pinpoints the key factors. If you cannot use that, if whatever your business is, if you are a copywriter like Carlos is, right? If you think that he does not have to learn how to avoid the superficial when it comes to the art of writing copy, then you are kidding. Everybody's got to learn to penetrate the complex. And just like in the other quote where Beethoven says, force your way into its secrets, right? Okay, let me calm down. All right, we go to George Halas, co-founder of the NFL. And he says, don't do anything in practice that you wouldn't do in the game. Well, to me, I couldn't find the page to reference this, but it is the Bruce Lee quote that says, approximate the reality of the situation, right? So in your training, don't do any ridiculous stuff in your training. Approximate the reality of the situation. If what we're training for is true combat, is real combat, then we want to make the training as close as possible to the real thing, right? It's like rehearsal for anything that you're going to put out there, right? NFL again, Chuck Knox, NFL head coach, practice without improvement is meaningless, right? So now, if you think about it, see, that goes right back to the original 10,000 quote. Practice without improvement is meaningless. So when Bruce Lee wrote the thing or said the thing about the practice of 10,000 kicks once, right? This is what he's talking about. Nobody's going to improve without spending the required amount of time on just the one thing, right? So that's what this is about. So practice without improvement is meaningless. That also means that when you train people, when you teach people, when you coach people, you got to invest in training and teaching and coaching their minds also. Because there are a lot of people, this harkens back to, if you've ever seen or heard me talk about George Leonard's concept of mastery, right? The people who practice, who come to class and never improve, they're the ones that we call the hackers, right? They're not interested in actually bettering themselves through the study or the practice of Jeet Kune, right? People who are on the mastery path are, right? So approximate the reality of this, practice without improvement is meaningless. Ernest Holmes, right? I'm older than a lot of you guys out there, so a lot of my references date me, right? So Ernest Holmes is the author of The Science of the Mind, and he said, teach and practice, practice and teach. That is all we have. That is all we are good for. That is all we ever ought to do. I can tell you again, right. Kevin Seaman, because Kevin, of the names that I see scrolling through here, Kevin is the person that I know best as an instructor, right? So I'm sure Kevin will agree with this one also. Teach and practice, practice and teach. That is all we have. That reminds me of something that Sifu Asano said once, where he said, I think it was a Kali reference, and he said that in Kali you have beginner students, intermediate students, advanced students, and students who teach, right? The idea being, even as an instructor, always remain a student. So teach and practice, practice and teach, same thing, right? Okay, I think that's it. That's about everything. It's in the end, right? So here's one more. This is famed basketball coach, UCLA, I think, basketball coach, John Wooden, right? And he said, in the end, so this is for all the instructors that will see this. In the end, it's about the teaching. And what I always loved about coaching was the practices. Not the games, not the tournaments, not the alumni stuff. But teaching the players during practice was what coaching was all about to me. That's John Wooden, right? So that's it for today. As always, feel free, like and comment. After I post the video, I'll go through the comments and I'll reply to anything. If you got a question for me, put it in there. I'll answer the question for you. And check out Volume 1, Quick Skills Series, available at ilovejeetkundo.com. And on Friday this week, so on the second I Love Jeet Kune show, the Jeet Kune Dialogue. So on Friday, we might have a double header for you. I still have to confirm the times, but I should be dialoguing this weekend with Ron Kosakowski of Practical Self-Defense Training Center in Connecticut, and also with Peter Nguyen of Legacy Jeet Kune in California. So as soon as I have the times, I'll post it on Facebook for you. I'll post it also on Instagram. You guys can find me on Instagram at Dwight D. Woods, I think it is. Right? And we'll take it from there. Right? Okay. Thanks everybody for tuning in. And I'll see you next week, Wednesday, 3 p.m. Same I Love Jeet Kune channel. This is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Rebel, signing off. You guys enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.